A man is driving alone on a quiet stretch of road at night. As he looks out the windshield, he sees a beautiful young woman in a white dress on the side of the road. He offers her a ride, and she accepts. The man tries to make conversation with the woman, but she's pretty shy. To his surprise, she asks to be let out of the car in the middle of the road. When she gets out, the man realizes they're in front of a cemetery. The woman heads for the cemetery gates, but before she can reach them, she vanishes into thin air. This classic tale has been told all over the Chicago area for the better part of a century now. Let's explore the legend known as Resurrection Mary. Resurrection Mary is said to haunt a specific stretch of Archer Avenue between Resurrection Cemetery and Justice and the former O. Henry Ballroom in Willowbrook, both suburbs of Chicago. Stories of how she died vary a bit. Most versions have her visiting the ballroom at some point in the night, maybe storming off after an argument with her boyfriend, only to get struck by a car as she leaves. Others say she was actually in a car when it crashed. Whatever happened, she reportedly never left the area where her life ended. The first person to reportedly encounter Resurrection Mary was a cab driver named Jerry Paulus in 1939. Some sources said 1936. Paulus frequented the O. Henry Ballroom at the time, and while he was there one night, a woman caught his eye. She was beautiful, with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing a white party dress. As they danced, the woman told Paulus her name was Mary, and that she lived on the south side of town. When Paulus touched the woman's hand to his, he realized her fingers were ice cold. He offered her a ride home at the end of the night, but this is where things get truly strange. Mary initially asked Paulus to take her to Archer Avenue, even though the home address she'd given him was nowhere near it. After he stopped the car, Mary asked him to wait there for her. He asked if he could walk her to her destination, but she only responded by saying, "Where I'm going, you can't follow." Paulus only watched as she exited the car, walked into the road, and disappeared. The next day, Paulus visited the address Mary had given him. A woman answered the door, and he caught a glimpse at a photograph inside, a photograph of Mary. When he inquired as to who she was, the woman said that was her daughter, and she'd been dead for 5 years. Another story related to Mary emerged in the 1970s. Either a couple or a man, depending on the version, saw a young woman inside the cemetery when it was already locked. They contacted police, but by the time they arrived, the woman was gone. However, a set of iron bars had somehow become burnt and bent in a way no human could do. Despite this, some people claimed to see thumbprints in the burn marks. The bars were reportedly sawed off years later after tourists kept flocking to the cemetery to see them, but the gap where they used to be remains. In another alleged encounter from the late 1970s, a cab driver only identified as Ralph said he picked up a strange woman in the road. It was the middle of the night, and despite the December cold, the woman wore no jacket. She wasn't very talkative during the ride, but she did say one strange thing. The snow came early this year. There was no snow on the ground at the time. The woman requested to be dropped off at a shack across the street from the cemetery and proceeded to vanish on her way there. The very next day, a blizzard came through town. Another story from the 1970s involved a report of a driver accidentally hitting a pedestrian. When police arrived at the scene, they asked the clearly distraught young woman where the body was of the person that she hit. The woman pointed to a depression in the grass that looked like it had just had a body there. But according to her, the body disappeared just as the squad car rounded the corner. In another incident from 1981, a couple picked up a young girl on the side of the road. The girl wore a white evening gown with a red sash and said she was going to prom. The couple gave her a ride to the local high school, where they dropped her off. She thanked them for the ride, got out of the car, and promptly disappeared. Two more well-known sightings happened in the 1980s. In one, a couple saw a girl walking on the side of Archer Avenue, close to the cemetery. The girl's face was illuminated, and the husband said it was like a black void with no facial features. They did end up turning the car around to investigate further, but by the time they got there, the girl was gone. Another story involves two female friends out for a drive. When a woman ran in front of their car, she was so close the driver should have hit her, but nothing happened. There was no impact, and the woman quickly vanished. I did find another interesting story in the comment section of an article on chicagohistory.com. In this one, a woman claims she and her husband saw Mary in the early 1990s. The girl they encountered wore what looked like a yellow prom dress, and, despite the cold, no shoes. The woman thought she might have been an actress who had been filming something, but there was nobody else in sight. When she looked to her left, she saw a cemetery. She didn't hear about the legend of Resurrection Mary until later, then thought back and wondered if that was who she had seen. These are just a few of the many reports out there from people who think they've encountered Resurrection Mary. But one question remains. If Mary is a real ghost, who was she in life? Let's go over some theories. One of the most well-known theories is that Mary was a 21-year-old named Mary Bregovy, who was hit by a car and killed in 1934. Bregovy lived on the same road as the woman Jerry Paulus encountered. She also would have died about 5 years before his sighting, which would line up with his story. But there are some discrepancies. Mary had dark hair, while nearly every eyewitness account says Resurrection Mary is blonde. The car accident that killed her also happened nowhere near Archer Avenue, so why would she haunt that stretch of road in death? She is buried in Resurrection Cemetery, supposedly in an unmarked grave next to her parents. But maybe the most talked about candidate is Anna Norkus. Find a Grave lists her as Ona Maria, Maria being the Slavic form of Mary, which might be why she's considered. Anna was a young blonde girl who was killed in a car crash close to the ballroom in either 1927 or 1929. Sources vary quite a bit on the details. She's actually not buried in Resurrection Cemetery, but in St. Casimir Catholic Cemetery in Chicago. However, there are rumors that her body was temporarily buried in Resurrection during a gravedigger strike. Did this somehow give her a connection to the cemetery? But there is one detail that doesn't quite fit: her age. Different sources put her age as low as 7 and as high as 13. But most accounts say Resurrection Mary is in her late teens at the absolute youngest. One more name I've seen mentioned is Mary Miskowski. According to the stories, an 18 or 19-year-old Miskowski was killed in a hit-and-run accident on her way to a Halloween party in 1930. However, there's no record of anything like this ever happening. Another name I've seen was Mary Kovac, who I could find absolutely no record of online. One CBS article said she died of tuberculosis, which would make her an unlikely candidate anyway. The closest I could find was a Mary Kovacic, who died in 1929. This doesn't mean these women didn't exist, just that we don't know enough about them to say for sure. And in truth, there are probably well over 100 women who could possibly fit the legend. So we'll probably never know. There is one more theory, the theory that has to come up in any stories about the paranormal. Is Resurrection Mary real at all? Of course, if you don't believe in ghosts, this is a theory you might gravitate to naturally, but let's unpack it a little bit. The story of Resurrection Mary is in a family of urban legends known collectively as the Vanishing Hitchhiker. I did a full video on this legend a few years ago, so I will link it up in the cards and down in the description if you want to know more. But a brief overview of the legend goes as follows. A man is driving alone at night when he spots a beautiful young woman on the side of the road. He offers her a ride and she accepts. After dropping her off at the address she gave him, he makes his way back home, only to realize later that she left something behind in his car. A jacket, maybe a scarf, or even a box of cigarettes. So he returns to the house to give her back the lost item, only to be greeted by her mother. The mother says the woman he gave a ride to is her daughter, and she's been dead for years. The story of Resurrection Mary fits this archetype extraordinarily well, almost like a paint-by-numbers version of it. Many online speculators are especially skeptical of the last portion of Jerry Paulus's account, where he visits the woman's mother, because according to them, it just sounds too much like the classic legend. However, there is one thing that sets Resurrection Mary apart: the eyewitness statements. As stated by Ursula Bielski on AmericanGhostWalks.com, the Resurrection Mary stories bear an uncanny resemblance to these widespread tales. Accounts of Mary by eyewitnesses have conformed to the universal model even more perfectly than do most second-hand legends. However, the existence of so many first-hand reports raises questions about the assertions that Mary is mere folklore. Like I mentioned earlier, there are dozens of alleged sightings of Resurrection Mary, way more than I was able to go into here. And most of them are first-hand eyewitness accounts, rather than stories you hear from a friend of a friend like most urban legends. Did all of these people lie about their encounters, using other story blueprints to fill in the details? Or is the sheer number and context of all these accounts evidence that it might be real? As always, I will let my viewers decide for themselves what they believe. The O. Henry Ballroom was later renamed the Willowbrook Ballroom, and it burned down in 2016. Sightings of Mary have slowed significantly ever since. Did she disappear along with one of the places she supposedly haunts? Or are the stories just not as talked about as much anymore? Either way, workers at Chet's Melody Lounge on Archer Avenue serve a Bloody Mary for her every Sunday in the hopes she'll show up and claim it. So far she hasn't, but you never know what could happen in the future. We'll probably never know just who, if anyone, is haunting Archer Avenue. But one thing's for sure: the story of Resurrection Mary will continue to endure for as long as humans are around. Thanks for watching, and have a creepy day.